Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome to today's video, and I am going to go over my experiences in the Diablo 4 beta. Now, instead of making a video just going over everything I thought about the beta, I thought I would focus on the 5 things I hated the most about the beta, and just how Diablo 4 is shaping up to be in general. Now, overall, I do think the game is going to be a huge success. I think they get a lot of things right regarding the gameplay, the graphics, the level design. And you can see right here, even the boss fights are kind of fun. So right now I am doing like the Act 1 boss. And I think my character was a little bit under geared. I didn't do one of the class quests. And I am playing a kind of build that's a pseudo melee build. And you know that saying, in any ARPG, being melee is generally not going to be the best option, because your damage uptime is always going to be a bit bad. And especially on a fight you don't really know what's going on, this is definitely the case. Now, overall, Diablo 4 is not going to be the ARPG to replace Path of Exile. I know a lot of people are looking for Path of Exile 2, but the real reason is Path of Exile 2 is going to be what's going to be replacing Path of Exile 1. Now, Diablo 4 is more of a spiritual successor to Diablo 3, a kind of next generation ARPG in the sense of its graphics, and a little bit of updated in the sense that it's an open world game. It's not so linear in terms of level design, and we're going to go over that in a little bit. Now, like I said before, I fully anticipate Diablo 4 to break a lot of sales record. I think in the first week, we can expect at least 10+ million copies sold. Now, the biggest thing about Diablo 4, and the same thing happened in Diablo 3, is that Diablo is a huge franchise. It's a franchise that a lot of casual players will try out the game even though they would never touch an ARPG usually. So that means there's going to be this little trickle-down effect where a lot of players who play Diablo and like the game want to try out maybe something a little bit more in-depth, and that's where they're going to give Path of Exile a try. Now, I do think that one of the main problems with Path of Exile and trying to find more players is that the game has fully saturated its market share, so it's unable to gain new players. So I do think that Diablo 4 will be very, very good in terms of that. Now, Diablo 4 is very smooth to play. The combat is very, very responsive, and everything feels good about the actual core gameplay and how the character feels and moves and how the skills look. Now, in terms of the end game and the build customization options, it's kind of too early to really draw any conclusions. In the beta, you're only able to get to level 25. And if you look right here, you can't even see the Paragon level 50 board. You can see the full skill tree, but we are only able to be in Act 1. If you go look right here, the quest cannot be progressed in this version of the game. So we're only able to do this area over here, which is Act 1. And this is pretty much the whole world. So you can see there's going to be a lot more different areas to explore. So the beta is a very, very small picture of how big the scope of the game, and I do think the scope of the game is relatively large. So first off, the main thing I hate the most about the game at the moment, and I do think that hate is probably a little bit of a strong word, more like stuff I dislike about the game. Now, Diablo has been a game where in the past, it is impossible to bind move only to right or left click. So in this game, they actually allow you to decouple it, but they do it in a very, very strange way. Now, you can see here, you can combine move / interact / basic skill slot into the same button. So that means you can left click, and that will make it so that your left click will move you. It will interact and pick up items on the ground. And then the basic skill can be like mouse button 1, your main attack or whatever. So in this case, it would be Heartseeker. Now, the annoying part about this is that you sometimes do not want to attack. You just want to move to a certain area, and you don't want to be bothered with attacking. Now, right now, there is a way to bind it to something else. So you can see right here, they have a move only command. You can actually rebind it to the left click mouse button, something you were unable to do before. Now, the problem with this is you can't bind, move, and interact to the same bind. So if you do right here, you can see that it has been unbound. So you'll see why this is a huge problem. So if we go, let's go find some monsters to kill. So whenever you want to pick up items, you can't just do what you usually do in other ARPGs like Path of Exile or something, where once you kill a monster and some item drops, you can just hover over it. And let's see if I can actually find any items to drop. So like say right here, you want to pick up this item. If you right click it, well, that thing actually got picked up. But normally another item, if you right click it on you would be unable to pick it up. You will have to actually press E. So let's just say this was an item. In order to pick this up, instead of just being able to click it, you have to press a completely other keybind, E, in order to pick it up. This makes it feel very, very unsmooth. It feels very unintuitive for the game to be like that. And I do think that this is one of the few things that they're going to address right away, because this should be a really, really small change in the sense that you want to be able to combine, move, and interact together, and then have it separate with the basic skill slot. So right here, this should be combine move/interact instead of move/interact and basic skill slot. Or it should give us the option, because there's no way you want to be pressing a different button to pick up an item on the ground. And you do pick up a lot of items in this game. There is a lot of items that drop, and having to hover over it and press E or whatever your interact button is instead of just clicking on it kind of breaks the whole flow of the game. And I do think that this is one of the changes that they will immediately do, because a lot of people are actually complaining about this. Now, next up is the zoom level of the game, and the game just feels a little too zoomed in. If you've ever played Path of Exile before, you will see that a lot of people actually complain how zoomed in the game is. Now, Diablo 4 is actually less zoomed in than Path of Exile, but that's not really a good thing, because you don't want to be copying one of the worst aspects of Path of Exile, and I do know a lot of people complain that Path of Exile feels too zoomed in. Now, the problem with this is that this leads to the game feeling like a mobile game. So when you go towards like one of these narrow corridors, this looks very similar to a mobile game in the sense that the landscape and the scope of the environment just feels very narrow and confined. And this is just a little bit of a problem that I do think that I'm not really sure what they can do. I don't think that they will allow us to zoom out more. And that's just something that we're going to have to deal with. Now, some boss fights do zoom you out. So if you look at the Act 1 boss that I was fighting, you can see that this thing is way more zoomed out than, say, like walking right around here. Oh, I died. Well, that's actually my first death, so yikes. Yeah, so you can't really AFK in the game. Oh, well, I mean, you die sometimes. Good thing it's not hardcore. But the game is still less zoomed in than Path of Exile, but I do think the level design that Diablo 4 has, combined with the more zoomed in element, really does make feel like a mobile game in certain aspects, and that's not something that's very good. Now, next up, it's the amount of MMO light elements in Diablo 4. A lot of people say that Diablo 4 is kind of like a marriage between Diablo 3 and Lost Ark. And when playing through the game, it does feel very, very similar to Lost Ark in the sense that you're going to different towns, and each town is pretty much this little waypoint that lights up. And then there's some side quests to pick up, and you do the side quests, and then you get some XP. And then there's some random events that pop up around the world, and then there's also some world quests where you have to do, and some optional side quests, and then there's some rifts that open up. And it just feels very, very similar to an MMO, and it feels like I'm playing an MMO instead of playing an ARPG, and I don't really know if that's a good thing. For me personally, that's not a great thing. I know for other people, they like the experience a lot more. I do think that the future of ARPGs is probably going to lean towards some mixture of an MMO and a pure ARPG like we're used to. This does make the game feel like a little bit of a Lost Ark clone. And one of the weird things is let me resurrect from this, is that so you can actually just TP back to town. So let me show you. So there's these quests right here. You can see collect Ice Clan bones, and Ice Clan bones you have to pick up 24 out of 25, and we are playing an ARPG. We're not trying to collect stuff, and in order to collect stuff, you actually have to hover over it with the interact button. So maybe if the game wasn't so bad in terms of the move/interact, this would feel a little bit better. And then there's also the aspect of where it's kind of weird to track quests. When you reach an area that you're in for the quest, it doesn't start immediately tracking it. You have to go to your journal and then find the quest that you're trying to do. So you can see there's actually a lot of side quests to do. So right here, there's side quests for training militia. This one's acquire journals, collect Ice Clan bones, and then there's gather from the undead, find a certain person, and then there's just a bunch of quests to do around the map. And that's just something that kind of makes the game a little bit too much of an MMO for my taste. And the looting quests do feel very, very awkward. Does remind me of playing Lost Ark. For me personally, I like just going to a dungeon around the world and then completing the dungeon, getting some reward, and then progressing the campaign, and not having to worry about doing a billion side quests in every single town hub. Now, the main thing is you kind of also need to do these side quests, because if you look right here, And you can see that you actually get Paragon points and skill points when you complete a certain amount of renown. And renown, you can also do it a lot through side quests. You can also do it by exploring the world. You can do it through side dungeons. You can do it through the rifts that appear. But you also get a base amount of renown, I think, for completing dungeons. So you can technically skip doing all the side quests if you really want to. But you kind of need to complete the full zone like in an MMO in order to get all of the stuff out of the zone. So in this scenario, you would get 4 Paragon points, and you need all the Paragon points you can get by the end game. Now, next up is something that I'm not really sure exactly how it will feel later on, and that's how enemies scale with your player level. So this breaks the feel of the game in the sense that you never feel like you're getting way more powerful compared to the enemies in a certain zone, because the monsters are always scaling to the level of your character. So my character right now is level 16, and you can see, even though this is an entry-level zone, and this is also another zone that might be a little bit later on, every single area is level 16. And you can see the level up here, 16, 16, 16, 16. So this allows the feel of the game to feel like your character is never getting stronger. And in ARPGs we play because we want us to feel stronger. And another thing is that in the open world, you can run into other people. And even though you might be max level in the beta, like level 25, you could run into someone that's level 12. And then that person can actually be doing more damage to a world event boss than you are because of the level scaling formula. The level scaling formula a lot of times is kind of busted. We can see this if you ever play Path of Exile with level down scaling. It's the same exact thing. There's a reason why most people do not turn it on. Now, the reason why Blizzard probably implemented this is in order for people to play together and not have to worry about where they are in the campaign and what level the zone is. But it just leads to this feel that your character is not really getting stronger. Now, this is also maybe a problem in hardcore, because in hardcore, a lot of people farm lower level zones where it is safer in order to get gear. And then once they get gear, they can progress to a harder zone. But in this scenario with the enemy scaling with your player level, it's a lot harder to accomplish. I do think in the future, it is possible that there's going to be certain caps for level scaling so that you won't have to deal with, what's it called? You won't have to deal with the scaling aspect where, so you have to press E in order to pick that up. You don't have to deal with the scaling aspect where certain mobs are going to be super high level because it's capped out at a certain level. So maybe there's going to be like a level 40 cap, and then your character's level 50, so you won't have to deal with the monsters being level 50. Now, next up, we have the skill tree and / mob density. I kind of had 6 things to say instead of just 5, and I kind of didn't plan accordingly. But one of the main problems I do think is that the skill tree lacks a lot of customization. I do think in a lot of ARPGs now, we have the use of support skill gems to modify the skill that we're trying to use. And in Diablo 4, we are left with a system where, let's go see here. Oh, there's some people in town. We're left with a system where there's not really that many meaningful choices. The only meaningful choice you have for a skill in order to customize it is that you can choose one of 2 attributes or something that the skill will do instead of having a lot of meaningful choices. So every single skill that you have 1 or 2 choices. So in this case of this skill right here, you could increase the critical strike damage the enemy takes from you by 5% for up to 4 seconds, up to 25%. Or you can make it so it ricochets to an additional enemy, dealing 30% of the original damage. So you can see in this case, there's not really much choice for each skill. You have to take this travel node, and then this is the only choice you make. Now, the skill tree also looks a little bit weird. If you've ever played Diablo 3, it's pretty much the exact same system, except they pretty much put it into a chart format. And it's kind of hard to actually look at, but it is what it is. Now, in terms of endgame customization, it's kind of hard to know how good it will be, because as you can see here, the Paragon is locked until you're level 50. Now, next up, since the skills are all tied to a certain class, this will invariably mean that there's going to be less build diversity in the game, because in order to use a skill, for instance, like concealment, you have to be a rogue no matter what, instead of it being like Path of Exile, where you could use a certain skill like Barrage for every single class in the game instead of it being limited to just rogue. Now, lastly, I do think that mob density is all over the place. Sometimes you feel like there's almost no mobs that spawn. And it's kind of a jarring feeling. You're kind of traveling through the world where it's supposed to be a hack and slash adventure. However, you're traveling through the world and there's no mobs at all. And it kind of just feels like you're playing an MMO again instead of ARPG. Now, I do think that this could be alleviated in the future because the harder difficulties and later acts might have more mobs. Now, overall, I do think that Diablo 4 is a fun joy to play. I do think that the main way that people will be disappointed about Diablo 4 is if they try to directly compare it to Path of Exile. The stuff I do complain about is more of a design choice that the Blizzard team decided to take with Diablo 4 and trying to make it more like an MMO. So if you are fine with the game playing more like a multiplayer, massively multiplayer online RPG, instead of a traditional ARPG, then you will be perfectly fine. I do think the game will be very successful at launch and for the first few seasons, but it really all comes down to the end game and how much build customization options there are and how the itemization is. If everyone is walking around with the same unique set, and then the only difference is whether the gear is ancestral or not, and if the only thing that people are looking out for is the item power for their gear, as you can see here, then it's not going to be as interesting and people are going to be burned out within a week or so like they currently are in Diablo 3. And it really also depends on if Blizzard will prepare meaningful updates every season like Path of Exile, or if the game will go down Diablo 3's route where it just is not updated. Now, more than likely, Blizzard are going to be pretty good about updating the game because they want to sell this premium seasonal battle pass, and that is going to be a huge source of money. I think the battle pass costs around $10 every season, and that is going to be their main way of revenue generation in addition to selling cosmetics in the future. But thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the Diablo 4 beta. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!